Welcome to 2 Cents Unfiltered, where we cut through the noise, challenge the narrative, and think for ourselves. Today, we're tackling a question that has baffled economists, historians, and anyone old enough to remember the Cold War. Why do so many young Americans have such a favorable view of socialism? For older generations who witnessed the collapse of the USSR, the killing fields of Cambodia, the starvation in North Korea, and Venezuela's economic implosion, this affection for socialism seems surreal, even reckless. Yet, polls show that more than half of adults under 30 say they view socialism positively. How did we get here? What does this new attraction to an old, failed idea really say about our culture, our education, and our moral compass? Today, we're diving deep, unfiltered, into why socialism keeps seducing the young and why every time it does, the world pays a heavy price: the mythic glow of socialism. To understand this allure, we have to understand the story young people are told. They're told socialism means fairness, that it's about equality, compassion, and community, that it's the antidote to greed and exploitation. But that's the sales pitch, not the reality. Every socialist revolution begins with promises: free education, free healthcare, guaranteed income, justice for all. And every one of them ends the same way: shortages, censorship, corruption, fear, and usually bloodshed. From Lenin's Russia to Mao's China to modern Venezuela, the dream always collapses under the weight of its own contradictions. Socialism doesn't fail because the wrong people implement it. It fails because it ignores the most basic truth about human nature. People respond to incentives, not slogans. So why do smart, educated young adults still embrace it? It's not ignorance, they can Google everything. It's emotion, the moral high that comes from believing you're on the side of justice. Socialism offers moral clarity without moral effort. It tells you that you're compassionate because you believe in government redistribution. It lets you feel virtuous without ever having to be generous yourself. That's powerful, especially in an age when social media rewards outrage over reason. Virtue signaling replaces virtue. Equality replaces excellence. And personal responsibility fades under a wave of collective guilt. Let's step out of the hashtags and into history. The Soviet Union promised liberation. It delivered gulags, breadlines, and the murder of 20 million of its own citizens. Mao's China promised a workers' paradise. It produced the Great Leap Forward: 45 million dead. Cambodia's Khmer Rouge promised equality. They emptied the cities and slaughtered anyone with glasses because education was bourgeois. Venezuela, in our own century, went from Latin America's richest nation to one where mothers trade food for medicine and electricity fails nightly. These are not accidents of history. They're the predictable consequences of centralized control and the destruction of individual liberty. Every time socialism is tried, freedom dies first. Many young people say those weren't real socialists. That's the escape hatch, the claim that real socialism has never been tried. But think about that. How many times must an ideology fail before we accept that the failure is built in? When every pilot flies the same plane and crashes in the same way, maybe it's not the pilot, maybe it's the plane. The refusal to learn from history isn't enlightenment. It's arrogance dressed as idealism. Now, let's be honest. There are legitimate concerns about wealth inequality. When a handful of billionaires control as much wealth as half the population, people start asking questions, and rightly so. But here's the fallacy. Identifying a problem doesn't mean socialism is the solution. Corruption, greed, and political manipulation exist under every system, capitalism included. The difference is, capitalism allows for course correction through competition, innovation, and free exchange. Socialism eliminates competition, and with it, accountability. When the government owns everything, who do you complain to? When the ruling class controls both your paycheck and your speech, where can you go for justice? The cure becomes deadlier than the disease. Here's a favorite line: no one needs $200 billion. Fair enough. But before we start redistributing, let's rewind. When Elon Musk was sleeping on the floor of his office, risking everything to build PayPal and later Tesla, no one offered to share his losses. Now that his success created hundreds of thousands of jobs and boosted retirement funds through Tesla stock, everyone wants to share the reward. You don't have to worship billionaires to recognize that wealth creation starts with value creation. Socialism erases that link, treating success as theft instead of achievement. And when success is punished, innovation dies. The romance of socialism thrives in comfort. When you've never gone hungry, socialism sounds compassionate. When you've never seen your currency collapse, Free sounds believable. That's why socialism is fashionable in Western cafes, not Cuban hospitals. Young people chanting "Eat the rich" on iPhones built by capitalist supply chains are living proof that affluence breeds amnesia. They don't reject capitalism because it failed them. They reject it because it succeeded so thoroughly that they can afford to fantasize about alternatives. There's another culprit: education. Our schools teach history as a morality play, not a study of cause and effect. Students learn about slavery and inequality, but rarely about the Holodomor or Mao's purges. They're taught that capitalism is exploitation, not that it lifted billions out of poverty in the last 50 years. So when they hear socialism, they picture Scandinavian countries with universal health care, not Soviet collectivization. But let's set the record straight: Denmark is not socialist. Its prime minister said it plainly. Denmark is a market economy with a strong welfare state. Those nations thrive not because they abandoned capitalism, but because they combined free markets with personal responsibility and limited government. That's not socialism, that's smart governance. For many young people, socialism has become a kind of religion. It offers sin, original sin equals privilege, salvation through activism, and a heaven on earth, equality. And like every false religion, it punishes heresy. Disagree on campus? You're problematic. Question redistribution? You're greedy. Mention the USSR. You're a boomer. When political ideology becomes moral identity, discussion ends and indoctrination begins. Socialism's moral vanity fills the void left by declining faith, family, and community, and replaces it with a state that promises to be all three. G.K. Chesterton once said, or was credited with saying, when a man stops believing in God, he doesn't believe in nothing, he believes in anything, and that's exactly where we are. Without the moral grounding that comes from faith or tradition, young people are spiritually hungry. Socialism feeds that hunger, not with truth, but with slogans. It promises meaning through struggle, identity through victimhood, and purpose through political tribe. But history teaches us when politics replaces God, the state becomes God, and the people become its sacrifices. Facts used to end debates. Now they barely start them. You can show videos of Venezuelan hospitals without power or statistics on Soviet famine. It doesn't matter. Because socialism isn't an argument, it's an identity. And when ideology becomes identity, reason becomes irrelevant. That's why this conversation can't be won with charts or citations alone. It has to be won with courage, with honesty, and with the willingness to tell uncomfortable truths. Every generation that forgets history pays to relearn it. And the currency is always the same: freedom, blood, and time. If we keep teaching young people to hate capitalism without understanding what replaced it in the 20th century, we are guaranteeing that they'll repeat the 20th century's mistakes. Socialism doesn't need to win an election to win a culture. It only needs to convince enough people that freedom is unfair and prosperity is immoral. Once that happens, the rest, censorship, control, collapse, follows naturally. The youth who romanticize socialism are not evil. They're idealists searching for meaning in a noisy, shallow world. But ideals without wisdom are dangerous. Good intentions do not erase bad outcomes. The 20th century was littered with utopias that turned into nightmares because people believed slogans instead of studying results. If we want young Americans to understand why socialism fails, we must teach them the value of freedom, not just as a slogan, but as a living principle. Freedom to speak, freedom to build, freedom to fail and try again. Because once freedom is gone, it never comes back peacefully. So next time someone says, socialism just means fairness, ask them, fairness for whom, at what cost, and who gets to decide? That's the heart of the debate and the heart of this show. I'm Carrie, and this is 2 Cents Unfiltered, because common sense deserves a microphone.